Hey, what's going on, guys? We have some breaking news. A title fight added to UFC 301 in Brazil. Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg for the Flyweight title. And I know people are probably already thinking, I know Joey's opinion. He's going to cry and whine about it. Undeserved title shot, undeserved title shot, undeserved title shot. Meritocracy, meritocracy, meritocracy. That's not going to be the case in this video at all, because I actually like this fight. And I actually think this was the right decision by the UFC. And I know people are going to say, Joey, what about Muhammad Mokaev? We're going to talk about Muhammad Mokaev in this video. And I think not only did Mokaev potentially screw himself out of a title shot, I also think this may have been what's best for Muhammad Mokaev, and the UFC could have been looking out for him, to be quite honest, while deciding to make Pantoja versus Erceg. Now, this is not the confirmed main event for UFC 301, but 301's right around the corner. May 4th in Brazil. How crazy is it? We're right around the corner from May. That is straight up insanity. UFC 300 is the next pay-per-view card. Where's the time going? But this is not confirmed to be the main event. Now, if it is the main event, I'm going to have some complaints about that, but we'll talk about that later in the video. Alexandre Pantoja, Steve Erceg. I've been campaigning for this fight. I manifested this fight. Matter of fact, let me insert a clip from my post-fight from Shamil Gaziev, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, where I specifically talk about this potential matchup. Check it out. But Steve Erceg looked phenomenal in this fight. And this might be a bit of a hot take. I know there's some talk about the flyweight division's in peril right now. Manel Kape misses weight and his fight gets canceled. Then you have Brandon Moreno losing to Brandon Royval. Then you have Amir Albazi who's injured. And there's talk of like maybe Mokaev, who we're going to talk about in a second, getting a title shot. Give me Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Give Steve Erceg a title shot within, I'm trying to remember when he made his short notice debut. I think it was in the last year. Imagine he's fighting for a title in the UFC from short notice debut to a title within a year. Mokaev's calling for a title shot. I know the division's kind of wide open right now. I say give Steve Erceg the title shot. That's what I want to see. Give Steve Erceg a flyweight title shot. So there you see, I actively was campaigning Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. And I love that the UFC made this fight. And I know people are going to say, Joey, what? Steve Erceg's ranked number 10. Yeah, let's go through the rankings. I always say sometimes it's not black and white. Sometimes there is a gray area. And sometimes there's no true clear-cut number one contender. And that's when I don't mind some of these kind of weird title shots, because there's nobody necessarily getting skipped over. But we're going to go through the majority of the top 10, if not all the top 10. Brandon Royval, number 1. Already had 2 fights against Pantoja, lost both of them, most recently in December at UFC 296. Number 2 ranked, Brandon Moreno. Just lost to Royval. It was a close fight, but he lost nonetheless. Number 3, Amir Albazi, coming off a win over Kai Kara-France, has a neck injury. I'm assuming he's not able to return by May 4th. Also, Ramadan, it's going to be ending, I don't know how much he wants to train during Ramadan. Some guys are different about that. Next up, Kai Kara-France, coming off a loss against Amir Albazi. Number 5, Matheus Nicolau, coming off a loss where he got brutally KO'd by Brandon Royval. Number 6, Manel Kape. I know people are saying, oh, give Manel Kape a title shot. I've been seeing a lot of people say that. Just because you want Manel Kape to get a title shot because he throws out homophobic slurs doesn't make his resume good. His resume is not good. It's decent. Maybe a win over Matheus Nicolau would have sealed him that, but he missed weight and the fight got canceled. Now it's rebooked for April 27th. His best win up until that point, who? David Dvorak? We're talking about the same best win that Steve Erceg has, and then you have the fact that he missed weight. You can't trust him. You can't, especially if this is the main event. You can't trust Manel Kape to make weight and fight for the title if this ends up being the main event of UFC 301. So he's out of the question. He's got to make weight and win a fight. Now, I know people are going to harp on number 6, Muhammad Mokaev. Muhammad Mokaev. I think he might have screwed himself out of a title shot, to be quite honest. I really do. He was tweeting out, calling out Royval for the Manchester card. He was saying that. He said, I want to fight Brandon Royval and then I'll earn my title shot. He said, I will finish Brandon Royval. He was tweeting actively, calling for him on the Manchester card. So in a way, he kind of forfeited his title shot. Now, I'm not saying he definitely didn't have a case to be made, because he does have a decent resume. He beat Alex Perez, who was ranked. He beat Tim Elliott. He beat Jafel Filio. He beat Malcolm Gordon, Charles Johnson, Cody Durden. Not the greatest resume ever, but obviously more wins and a decent amount of finishes than Steve Erceg. But you have the fact that that performance against Alex Perez was garbage. He looked amateurish. And I know he had some excuses. He was sick or he was injured. I can't remember. Maybe he had staph or something. I can't remember what it was. But he had some type of excuses after that performance, and he still did win that fight. But it was an ugly, horrible performance. And he's still so young. And this would have been a quick turnaround for him. He would have had a fight camp during Ramadan. I think it's probably best he got skipped over in a way. He's not clear-cut, in my opinion. He's not clear-cut number one contender by any means. And then you go through the rest of the rankings, and we'll come back to Mokaev in a second. Perez coming off a loss. Tim Elliott coming off a loss. Then number 10 is Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg, 3 fights in the UFC. Brutal KO against Matt Schnell. Before that, a win over Alexandre Costa, who I know a lot of people don't know who that is, but he's a very good fighter. And before that, a short notice replacement fight against David Dvorak, where he came in and beat David Dvorak on short notice, who was a top 10 ranked guy at the time, or bare minimum, just barely out of the top 10. So I say, why not? Why not? If I'm looking at the skills of each fighter, Steve Erceg has shown more skills than Muhammad Mokaev. He has nasty power, he has very good striking, and he has very good grappling as well. I think this is the best challenger for Alexandre Pantoja. You look at Muhammad Mokaev, he looks amateurish. He's 23 years old. He still hasn't developed his full skill set. I'll never forget, and I don't remember what the ages were, but a lot of people were really high on Horiguchi, Kyoji Horiguchi, years and years ago when he was in the UFC. And I remember when the UFC gave him a title shot, most people who've been paying attention to the sport were like, man, I think Horiguchi's a future champ, but I think this is a little bit too much too soon for him. But there was no other contenders. So they threw Horiguchi to the Wolves and Demetrius Johnson. He ends up losing to Demetrius Johnson. Then he kind of falls off a little bit and then has a career resurgence outside the UFC. So fair enough. I think that would have been another one of those scenarios. I think Mokaev is very good, but I think he's still developing his skill set, and he's not the elite level fighter he claims to be right now. Even though he is very good in the flyweight division, he's a top 10 talent for sure. He obviously still needs to work on a lot. And I think to turn around on short notice almost, and I know Erceg's doing that, to turn around on short notice against a guy like Pantoja, that's a tough ask, man. I don't think Mokaev had a chance in that fight, to be quite honest. Maybe he does. I think Pantoja is bound to lose eventually, and we're going to get to my prediction for this fight. I think he's bound to lose eventually because of all the wars he's been in. But I just think right now it's better for Mokaev to sit out and wait, maybe take another fight, maybe against a Royval, and then potentially get his title shot after that, because he doesn't have to make the quick turnaround. He doesn't have to have a training camp during Ramadan, and he doesn't have to come off that piss poor performance against Alex Perez, to be quite honest. But I also think him really actively calling out Royval might have had something to do with this. That the UFC could have been like, you know what, we want to have Mokaev on that Manchester card in the summer. It's a fight night card. Maybe they do Mokaev as like a co-main event against the Royval. Maybe they make that a main event. It could be Brandon Royval versus Muhammad Mokaev for that Manchester main event for a fight night card, because that just makes perfect sense. And also, I think that's in June or July, so it's not this quick turnaround for Mokaev. So honestly, if I'm Mokaev, if I'm his friend, if I'm his manager, if I'm, his coach, I'm like, you know what? This is a blessing in disguise, because Mokaev has come out and kind of complained a little bit on Twitter saying, I have a longer win streak, I have more finishes, and he kind of just complained a little bit. I think this is a blessing in disguise for Mokaev. And I personally love Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg, I think he's super underrated, to be honest. I think he's very good everywhere. And this is going to sound crazy because I think a lot of people aren't even super familiar with Steve Erceg. And I know his resume is kind of like, it's one of those resumes that looks decent. The KO win over Matt Schnell is good. The win over Alexandre Costa as well, good. And the win over David Dvorak's good. But it's not like, oh my God, this resume blows me away. But I think he's shown enough. He's shown just enough where I can look at Steve Erceg as a threat to Pantoja. I know a lot of people don't know him. I know a lot of people maybe don't remember his fights. He looks very good. He has knockout power. He has really good striking. He has grappling. I would say his grappling is honestly his biggest strength is his grappling. And Pantoja, we know how Pantoja comes out. I mean, Pantoja fights like a video game character half the time. I know he's had, kind of a not a great performance against Royval, but he had a flu or something that week. But before that, I mean, the fight against Moreno, one of the best fights ever. The fight against Alex Perez, the way he went out there and finished him. The way Pantoja just plots forward, looks to ragdoll you and looks for the finish. I love this matchup. I'm super happy with this matchup. And honestly, for an early prediction, and again, I'm going to dig more into it, and I don't want to get too carried away. I think Erceg could be the guy to beat Pantoja. Erceg has good cardio, good striking, knockout power, and the greats are bound to lose eventually. And I know Pantoja hasn't been on top for that long, but he's been around forever. He's 33 years old. Again, that's not, we're not at the 35-year-old curse yet. But you look at Steve Erceg, and Steve Erceg right now is in his 20s. He's 28 years old. So And he's still developing. He's getting better with every fight. And I know he's turning around on short notice, so it's not the optimal circumstances. He's traveling to Brazil. But I think Erceg can win this fight. Early prediction, I'm going to go Steve Erceg. I might change my mind. I'm not like dead set on that. I want to kind of really articulate to you guys that Erceg has a chance in this fight. And I think he can beat Pantoja. Pantoja's grappling. He's going to have to go out there and out-grapple Erceg, and Erceg has very good grappling. And this would be a crazy story for Erceg because Erceg made his UFC debut in June of last year at UFC 289 against David Dvorak on short notice. Won that fight. Then won another fight back at UFC 295, and then most recently got the KO over Matt Schnell. And 3 fights within a calendar year, winning a title potentially or fighting for a title even though. That's craziness. That's straight up craziness. So I think this fight makes the most sense. It's not black and white in this situation. There's not a true clear-cut number 1 contender. Mokaev was there. Shit performance against Perez. It's not like he's been taking out contender after contender after contender. It's not like he's been pitching shutout performances. I have no problem with Erceg. And Erceg, honestly, being ranked number 10, I think is a bit criminal. I really think is a bit criminal. I would rank him above Tim Elliott, rank him above Alex Perez. I mean, honestly, right now, I would rank Erceg like true ranking. I'd probably rank him number 7, and I would move Mokaev to number 8. So I would jump him up above Tim Elliott, Alex Perez, Mokaev. I would think about maybe ranking him above Kape as well. I know people are so high on Kape because, oh God, he attracts a certain community, But at the end of the day, Kape went, I don't want to say life or death, but he lost a round to Felipe Dos Santos. That has not aged well. That has not aged well at all, and that was short notice as well. So I have no problem with this fight. I think Steve Erceg is a legit contender. Now let's talk about the bad. I hope this isn't the main event, boys. I know I just kind of been positive about the fight. I said I manifested this fight, and this is the fight I wanted. I hope this isn't the main event because I'm looking at 301 right now. Tapology's listing it as the main event. The UFC did not say main event. They did not specify main event in the posting. But I don't know who else would be the main event. And then you look at right now, the main card, what is labeled as main card on Tapology, Paul Craig, Caio Borralho, Anthony Smith, Vitor Petrino, Michel Pereira, Makhmed Muradov. Not a good card at all. It's really kind of a quite embarrassment of a card. If you're going to have like a Pantoja Erceg as a main event, you need to stack the card underneath of it. And I don't know if some of these fights are going to be shifted down to the prelims. I don't know how many fights is on, or yeah, there's already 11 fights on this card. So you potentially have 2 to 3 more fights to be added. Could they add a Paulo Costa to the card? I don't know. I don't even know who they would book Paulo Costa against right now. I mean, I'm sure there could be someone that would fight Paulo Costa on this card. Maybe throw like a Johnny Walker on this card. Maybe, this is going to sound crazy. Maybe if Charles Oliveira wins at UFC 300 and he wants a quick turnaround, could by any chance they do Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira in Brazil? That would be crazy. I'm sure Islam would be down for that. He wants to be more active, but they're probably saving him for June. There's been talk of June. So I don't know if Islam would take that opportunity. But imagine if they throw Oliveira. Let's say Oliveira beats Arman. He's going to be number 1 contender. But let's say they offer him the opportunity to fight in Brazil. He could fight Gamrot. He could fight Chandler, honestly. It could be Oliveira-Chandler main event. I wouldn't give a shit. I know it's not a title fight, but it could be a contender fight. Kind of throw Chandler a bone, be a pay-per-view main event since he's got one dude on his mind. Let's see if we can get a second dude on his mind. He can listen to Creed after 301. So I don't know what they're going to do with 301 right now, but it's looking abysmal right now. And again, I like this main event, but I think I don't like it. I like this fight, this title fight. I don't like it as a main event. I feel like this is a really solid co-main event that I think a lot of people are going to take a dump on. But I hope and pray they find something to main event. I don't know what it would be. It was supposed to be Alex Pereira, Jamal Hill, but the UFC fumbled around with UFC 300. And then next thing you know, they're booking Jamal Hill to fight on 300 against Alex Pereira. So the Brazilian fans got screwed. Honestly, I don't mind that much, consider what they did to Glover Teixeira. So I don't really mind them getting screwed. But this is it's $85 in the States for a UFC pay-per-view. And I know everyone says, oh, do this, do that. I'm not doing that. All right, at the end of the day, it's $85 for this pay-per-view. If I got to watch the dead carcass of Paul Craig on the main card, we got 2 dead bodies on the main card. Paul Craig, Anthony Smith, both dead bodies. And then Michel Pereira, I like him on this card. I expected him to be on this card. But Makhmed Muradov, they couldn't give Pereira a contender. They could have booked him against, maybe Marvin Vettori now that he's out of the Brendan Allen fight. They could book him. I don't know. I don't know if they would. Honestly, I would love Michel Pereira, Paulo Costa. I don't know if the UFC would do it. Michel Pereira, Nasruddin Imavov, Michel Pereira, Jack Hermanson, all would have been great fights. All would have been great fights for the card, and that would kind of beef it up a little bit, but I don't know what they're going to do. Honestly, I'm just thinking about this in real time because the card is looking horrible right now. But ultimately, this is what we're going to get, considering UFC 300, UFC 299. The UFC stacked these like crazy, and now we got all these horrible Apex fight cards, and now we're going to get a little bit of a lackluster pay-per-view. But I don't want to complain too much. I don't want to complain too much because I don't mind having an occasional kind of shitty pay-per-view, considering what we got with 298, 299, and 300. And honestly, maybe this is a bit of a hot take, and I'm not looking at it. It's not right in front of me right now. UFC 301, even with the lackluster fights it has right now, considered to be main card fights. Just from my memory, it's already better than UFC 297 pay-per-view in Canada, January, with the main event as Sean Strickland versus DDP. It's already better than that card in terms of overall fights. And, you know, I mean, the prelims are okay. Elvis Brenner is on the prelims. I can't even pronounce the other guy's name. I'm not going to butcher it right now. Joe Anderson, Brito, Jack Shore is a good fight. Alexandre Costa versus Kevin Borjas is actually a low-key banger for the prelims. So the prelims aren't bad. Maybe they can throw some other fights on, at least two more. I would love if they just get Paulo Costa on the main card and maybe I don't know, just one more kind of top Brazilian. I'm just struggling to think of them right now. So basically you could have Johnny Walker, Paulo Costa, Gilbert Burns isn't going to make a turnaround. Maybe you could get Vicente Luque on the card, but he's fighting in 2 weeks, so I doubt it. And then maybe Charles Oliveira on a quick turnaround. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing out ideas. I did not come up with this before the video itself. But overall, let me sum this up. I like Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg is a legit threat to Pantoja. I don't know if he's going to pull it off. Again, early prediction, I'm picking Erceg to get it done. Because Pantoja's got to fall off eventually. He's taking too much damage. But overall, I think it's a good fight. I don't feel like anyone's getting blatantly skipped over. I think Mokaev, this is a gift to Mokaev to get more experience, not have a quick turnaround, and not really be forced to have a full camp during Ramadan, coming off a win over Alex Perez, where he didn't look that good. It gives him a chance because Flyweight's wide open right now. Now, maybe Manel Kape, if he wins against Mateus Nicolau next month, maybe he could not leapfrog Mokaev, but maybe he gets the next title fight if he makes weight for that. So that does kind of screw Mokaev, but if Kape loses or whatever, Mokaev's going to be next in line to fight the winner of Pantoja and Erceg. So he's still going to get a title fight in the next 6 months, but it depends. If he does end up fighting Royval on the Manchester card, he could lose to Royval. So that's a big if, but I do think that's a good stylistic matchup for him to win, even though Royval's super scrappy and his wrestling has improved. But overall, I think this is a blessing in disguise for Muhammad Mokaev. And ultimately, I love that Steve Erceg is getting the next title shot. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.